Hey everyone, welcome to another comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I am delighted to be talking with someone who has guided others in the ways of comics making, a person that has created a variety of books about how to make comics. And we also have a particular book that we're talking about on this episode. So, very curious to explore this topic and explore comics making with Cara Bean. Cara, thank you for jumping in and joining.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's really wonderful to be on your podcast. I feel happy and excited.
Well, same here. Glad to have you, and glad that you said yes to the invitation. So, by means of a first question, before we talk about this book, here I am, I am me. Curious about what connected you with comics and visual storytelling.
Yeah, it was funny. Your question was like, what drew you to comics? And I was like,
Mhm.
drawing. So like I am very much a image maker first, and I love doodling and drawing, and I studied painting and visual arts, and so I come very much from the visual side.
Mhm.
And I didn't have confidence in writing for a long time. I have some dyslexia and some stumbling blocks that um, made me question whether I could do that part of it. But I think I always loved anything that had humor and visual art. So I loved newspaper comics growing up. I loved Calvin and Hobbes. I kind of went deeper into the fine art side of things, graduated from my MFA, and didn't really want to make paintings anymore, and just kind of stopped making art officially, but I was still doodling and drawing constantly in sketchbooks.
Mhm.
And I got this like terrible job photocopying for music professors for like a whole year, just like everyday photocopying. And so as a doodler, I would like photocopy my drawings and mail them to friends and make little letters because I'm just like that way. And one of my friends who's a cartoonist, his name is Matt Smith.
Mhm.
He got one of my drawings. He's like, this looks like indie comics. Like I think kind of think you're making comics because I'm like writing and I'm drawing. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't know about indie comics. And he took me, there's a store in Boston called Million Year Picnic, and he showed me the like mini comic section of the store. And I found all these I found like John Porcellino, and I found Anders Nilsson, and just like all these, oh, Nate Powell. I found his
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
early comics. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know this could be comics. And so that just opened my mind to the idea that maybe I could make comics. And it was a slow burn of trying to learn how to make comics after that. But I got really excited about it. And once I figured out, and that's when I figured I could tell stories, because once I could pair it with an image, it like freed me from judgment of how my writing sounded. Sorry, that was
Nice.
my gateway. That's a short story.
Love it,
Yeah.
love it. Well, and I love what you said there about I didn't know this could be comics because that's just uh I love that expression of finding like some way of storytelling that you didn't know existed. And I love how
Mhm.
you were doing that already and then kind of figured out that's where the community was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it killed me because I went to graduate school in Seattle in the like very late 90s, early 2000.
Hmm.
And there was a huge amazing comic, ND comic scene there. And I had no idea. And I kicked myself like, oh, if I'd only known, I could have met some of these people.
Yeah, yeah. So you've also, speaking of meeting people and connecting, you do workshops. You've written books about how to draw things, including mustaches, by the way. I'll mention that. So curious about some of those experiences that you've had so far and the collaborations and connections that have been some of the most positive ones.
Definitely. I was a high school art teacher for 13 years, and I developed sort of like that awakening of loving comics happened while I was teaching teenagers, and so they love comics too, so that we were all like vibing on making comics. And so I love um, unlike a lot of cartoonists, I'm more social. I love drawing with people. I love interacting with people. Like, I have to recharge my battery after, but I really do love like my favorite thing is sitting and drawing with other people.
Hmm.
So that's part of just who I am. I when I make, there are certain times that I have made comics with other cartoonists, and that's been delightful. I love playing drawing games with like anybody, but when you play with other cartoonists, it's like mind blowing because some people can draw like crazy. It blows my mind that they can draw so well. So like to riff off of someone else, it's like very exciting. But then in this current project that I'm working on, an interesting thing happened. Well, I had to collaborate because I was kind of a science communicator for this comic, and it's about mental health. And so I'm not an expert. I'm really just using my teaching chops and my cartooning chops to bring information and hopefully like a pleasant and entertaining way to people to read. And so therefore I had to collaborate with many experts in order to make sure I was getting my content correct. I go with my gut on sort of the voice and the heart, but I need other people to tell me whether it's accurate or if it's in the right order of the conversation. Like, what should you say first? That's something really hard when you're interpreting someone else's information. So I
Mhm.
did meet this wonderful therapist named Michael Safranek. He's from the UK, and he uses comics in his practice of therapy. And so he was kind of following my book because we're both interested in comics and mental health. And during the pandemic happened, we were all shut in, and I was writing chapters about depression and suicide. And those were the ones that I was like, gosh, I really hope I'm doing this okay. Like I'm just like praying I'm getting this right. And so I invited Michael in to like edit me and kind of read what I'd done so far. And we actually Zoomed and had some great talks, and even we drew together over Zoom. And that was like lovely. I just felt
Mhm.
really safe with him sharing this content that I was trying to create. And I actually invited him to be in the book because I was like, would you want to be a character in the book? And he was like, I mean, yeah, sure. And so then I said, well, like, what would you can't be yourself. You have to be like an animal or something. And he had to interview his family, and they had to pick what animal he was going to be. And it was like either a sloth or a bear, and they chose bear. And I was like, great. And so he's a bear therapist in my book, and
I
it's
love
like
it.
one of my favorite parts in the book is his character. And so that's like probably my favorite collaboration, but there's been other great ones too.
Yeah, well, kudos for taking on a topic that's very vital. We're talking a lot about trauma-informed instruction and education, and hopefully people are becoming more aware of and sensitive to mental health and creating sustaining positive mental health. Curious about anything that you'd like to share about the book beyond sort of the research process that you went into there and kind of what led you in this direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I have an observation I feel like your teacher listeners and colleagues would appreciate, which is when you're in the classroom and you're losing the class, they're getting bored with you. If you share something about your personal life, even it's just like, oh, on the drive to work today, I saw a stray dog. It was a puppy, and I
Mhm.
had to pull over and like I'm trying to catch it now. People think this is my dog and I can't control it. People are beeping at me, but it's like I have to get to work. Suddenly, when you tell like a personal story like that, you've got their attention. They're hanging on your every word because
Mhm.
now it's real, right? And
Mhm.
that is something that I learned that my book had to have a piece of that in it. And so I do tell personal stories in my book. I call them pink pages, and they're like the pink colored pages. For each chapter, I try to find some way that I can connect the content to my personal life and my experiences. My last name is Bean, so I draw myself as a bean shape because my students call me Ms. Bean, and that's how I would sign my name, like Ms., and then I just draw Bean. So that bean got a face, and then it started moving around, and then it's on the board. And I'm sure other people have little quirky things like that you have with your students, but that bean character is what I think of myself when I'm teacher self, and I have other
Mhm.
characters for my younger self or my other, the self I don't talk to students or whatever. So and when I'm in that being mode, I can do anything. I can be anything. I'm just this little bean. So I can travel through landscapes, and that's another thing. So it was fun to play with the cartooning piece of this. Like the artist in me really liked going like, okay, each chapter needs to be a different place, and that
Hmm.
place is a metaphor for the content. And how do I move through it and play with it so that it gets entertaining and there's little fun things that you can find. So for instance, like the mind is a river and we're tubing through it. Fear is a chapter and that's a forest and there's monsters, but they're kind of cute. There's fun monsters and scary monsters. There's coping is a garden where we're
Hmm.
growing, our brains are growing. We're getting into what's healthy for our brains. And then substance use and addiction is a amusement park. It's a dopamine fest. You're gonna have
Hmm.
roller coasters, you're gonna have the spinning machines, and you're gonna have all these stimulating things that where we talk about the content. And what I found is that um, sometimes you just have to be like the teacher that's explaining things, and that's kind of boring, as we know.
Hmm.
But how to make that exciting in a comic, and I feel that Bill Watterson had the secret to that, and he's spoken about this in interviews, which is when he would lay on some like heavy philosophy or something kind of um, like a lot to take in.
Hmm.
That's when Calvin and Hobbes would be on the sled. That's when they would be like moving really fast. And so I was like, oh, I'm using that. Like
Hmm.
we're going on the roller coaster when we're talking about like the really like all of the side effects of drugs and the hard things that can happen. And then we get off the roller coaster and we get a little break. So you can do that as an artist. You can change the environment and give people breathing room with imagery.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's something that happens in my book. And then the getting help, oh yeah, the depression and suicide are kind of like moon desert scapes, like with not a lot of, they have rocks and sand and pits and sharp things. And then the getting help is all bridges, crossing over
Nice.
all. So I had fun, researching bridges and drawing bridges and moving from one space to another. And the Michael's character, the therapist, which is him, but lives in a tree house, and you climb up the tree to have your therapy appointment. Which I'm like, wouldn't that be so fun? Like I just
True.
enjoy being like, what would I want? Like what would be the perfect therapist? So that's yeah. So the book is really playful. It doesn't shy away from tough topics, but it is also very warm and gentle, I
Mm.
think. And so Workman Publishing is who's putting it out on April 2nd. They really let me be as weird as I am, and they didn't reel me in that much. Like they just found me, they found all these great experts, and I had some experts too that would read the work and give us feedback. But all the playful imagery and metaphors or untouched, those are I was able to play. And so that was I really hope that children respond to it. So far I've had one review from a kid and I got 5 stars. But
That's good. That
we'll
is
see.
good.
We'll see what happens.
And kids are honest reviewers, so that's
Yeah.
even
Oh
better.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Have it.
well, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. Trying to think if there's anything else about the book. Oh, every chapter has a question map. So
Oh,
that was a nice
nice.
thing about creating places too. So it's just a map of the, invented place, but I sort of asked the questions that I try to answer in the book, but you can also just ask yourself and be like, I wonder about that. And I think of it as a book you don't have to read cover to cover. Like you could pick it up and put it down,
Mhm.
or use it as a conversation piece about like, oh, let's just talk about anxiety, or like we have something about substance use we want to go over, or you don't have to it is a resource. And the funny thing about it is that it's a nonfiction comic book, which is not fun to say. But when you say graphic novel, everyone knows what you're talking about.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Oh, it's a graphic novel. But it's not a graphic novel because it's nonfiction work. So yeah, we called it, uh, an illustrated guide, but it's a comic. It's a very comic-y comic. I mean, it's all panels, the whole thing. So
Love it. Love it. I love the very brilliant visual metaphors you were talking about there, and it sounds like you had a lot of fun with a very challenging topic, but a very rewarding topic too.
yeah, yeah, it was 5 years. And I took 1 year off of teaching in my mind. I'm going to do this in 1 year. And it was so hard. I just started to crack a tiny bit. Maybe I just started to understand that I had to be in the book at the end of the 1 year.
Oh
And,
wow,
and
yeah.
so I was like, well, I don't have kids. I'm gonna, I don't have a house to pay for. I'm just gonna get rid of everything, live tiny. For like 3 years, we lived in my mom's basement and we just like pounded
Oh,
away trying to make this book. So I'm very proud that I finished it. And I think it was worth the fight because the earlier drafts were really bad ideas.
Finding the right venue, absolutely finding the right path. That's part of the creating process. So I'm curious about any next steps, any workshops or other elements that you'd like to share about. And then I also know you have a website, so I'll be sure and link that, but any other spaces where you like to connect with readers?
Yeah. So the funny thing about making comics, and especially as someone that's a little bit more extroverted than the typical cartoonist, you're so isolated. You're very on your own. I colored it, drew it, all this. I didn't have a team. It was just me. So, and then add the pandemic to that too. So like
Mm,
extra isolation. So I thought, wow, like I just made this really interactive book and I've not been practicing talking to people at all. And in fact, I'm like turned shy, just like going to the grocery store, like, I'm just barely
mhm, mhm.
interacting with anyone. I'm like, oh, I need to get my like talking to people chops back again. So I luckily there I live in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and there's a national park here. It's called New Bedford Whaling National Historical Park, and they have an artist residency, and they took me on for from January. It's going to be ending this month in March. And I could do a project there. And my project to myself was like, learn how to interact with people again, talk to people. So I called it sip and chats, and I would make people a cup of coffee or tea, and I'd show them my book, like because usually I show people my book and they start talking to me about mental health anyway. So I'm like, I'm just going to be ready for it, like practice being ready for it. So yeah, I would listen and I love to take doodle notes. So I would take notes and then I would make a little comic based on the conversation and email it to the person and go, this is what I heard. Like this is a piece of the conversation that stayed with me and I wanted to
Uh-huh.
like say it back to you. And I think it was inspired by my book with Michael and the turning into a bear. So I have
Mhm.
one person turned into a ghost, somebody turned into a mushroom, someone's a lion, and then a few people with just cartoon versions of themselves. But like we found out what they were in the conversation and we found some metaphors in the conversation. So I don't know that I can continuously do that forever, but it was like a beautiful way to practice active listening and kind of honor people sharing with me because I kind of feel like that's where I'm headed next with this book. And as for future projects, so I could, and then I don't know what I'll do with them, but I could maybe make something out of my little sip and chats.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
at the end of the day, I'm an art teacher and I still just love drawing with people. So I could see myself doing more drawing books or doing things about like drawing activities and workshops and sharing. Like I really love how drawing can kind of focus us or
Mm.
calm us or open up unexpected parts of your imagination. So that's what I'm really busy this month actually going to different libraries and drawing with various groups of people, which I get a kick out of after being working in public schools, having
Mhm.
like the same kids every day. Just show up at a random place and like random people of all ages come and they draw and they can like walk away if they don't like it. I'm like, that's fine, like there's no pressure.
Mm.
So I'm kind of enjoying the surprises that come of that and the games that we play games and that type of thing. So there'll be more of that. And then April is when the book comes out. So I'll be doing book signings, which I've never done before. I made that drawing book, but I didn't really do it's not the same thing. This is a really big projects where I do want people to know that I'm here and that I made it
Mm.
and that I care about them. So yeah, so that'll be a new chapter, a new exciting thing to hopefully people enjoy. And
Wonderful,
hopefully I enjoy
wonderful. Yeah,
it.
oh, I'm sure, I'm sure. And your students are lucky to have you.
Oh,
Lucky to have someone who is compassionate and engaged in making. So they're very fortunate in that way as well. And anything that we've missed before we close out our interview?
no, just want to give love to all the makers and educators and the people. I mean, there's a lot of stress on everybody. So, just share appreciation for all of you and that it's such important work that you're doing and it leads you in these directions that you would never have expected when you started. And I'm sure everyone has a story.
Absolutely. Well, Kara, thank you so much. Very well said, and glad to have you back anytime to talk about drawing and creating and educating.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.